Welcome to the Lair, a place where interesting people you may know tell you things you didn't. So grab a chair and your favorite vice and get comfortable. There are no rules in the Lair, but there is Laura Babcock. You know her from TV, and she is not into media monogamy. Let's find out who else is in the Lair.
We were just having a conversation here in the Lair, and I asked you to indulge me by not getting into it too fully before we started rolling, because I have to bring it up. It's just one of those moments. Okay, so Cable 14, in its wisdom, has offered the mayor his own show, which is, I think we all agree, awesome.
Absolutely. Having the mayor on cable television is the proper format for him. Cable television should be about accessing public officials at a local level.
And Lair used to do regular stints on my show. Back in the day, regional chairman Terry Cook had his own fireside chat full with Cardigan. Rob was a big fan of those. So it's appropriate, it's good, it's great, but there seems to be something sticking in your craw about it, Joey.
Well, it's not so much a sticking in me. I look at it and it's great. The concern I have with it is that the call screener is Peggy Chapman. She's producing the show. Not to be confused with the exact same person who's the mayor's chief of staff. It creates the appearance of a conflict of interest in that if you call...
Creates the appearance, or it is a conflict of interest?
At the very least, it creates the appearance. The mayor's chief of staff and Cable 14 both say that they don't feel it's a conflict of interest. I'll leave that to their judgment. I don't run TV shows.
Well, let's go over to the guy who's running.
But it's a perception of conflict of interest that is unacceptable.
Okay, so we have two people who can weigh in on this, and it's a rare moment of expertise. We have a communications specialist who understands perception in communication and media, Dr. Savigny, and we have Mike Cameron. Are you the producer of the mayor's show?
I am the Cable 14 access producer.
So you're the producer. So you're the producer.
I facilitate their broadcast.
Right. So that's the new CRTC talk, but you're the producer and Peggy's the community producer, correct?
Yes.
You're the in-house producer. For people who don't get the CRTC vernacular, you're the guy who's still producing the show. Peggy is the community producer. She comes up with content. They give you directives, just like Lauren and I do on O Show and Tara and Ron do on The Opinionators. So as the person who was quoted in The Spectator, you said there's no conflict of interest. We are, in fact, a libertarian control room, which I thought was really interesting, because I'm not sure that we think the same way about the word libertarian. I think of it as like Ron Paul in the U.S. and the Tea Party.
I don't know why he stuck those two things together with a he said in between.
So you're saying you didn't say that? You were misquoted?
No, I did use libertarian, but what I meant by that was that we were very liberal about who we put on the air. Well, libertarian, I think you could say libertarian is...
It's not what's on the air, it's the fact that the mayor's chief of staff is the one deciding what phone calls. It should be anybody but somebody with a political interest in making the mayor look good, with a history of controlling his media relations in such a way as to exclude those that do not give the message that she wants.
So two things here. I'm just picking on you with the use of libertarian because I think you misused it.
I didn't really know what I meant when I said it. I knew what I meant.
It's a political philosophy that says no government, essentially, right? And low taxes. It doesn't. I'm not sure that it extends to your policy.
Perhaps I meant no control.
I think that's where you were going. I'm just picking on you. Okay, so beyond that quote to the spec.
Thanks for picking on me.
You're welcome. What is the... we have a long history of picking on each other for language. We're both geeks. What is the basis for you to be able to say with such confidence to the media and to Joey here tonight that there is no concern about bias or perception of bias?
There is no bias. Perception is not always reality. Let's not call her a screener. Let's call her a receptionist.
But her title is screener.
No, there is no title. I see no title anywhere that says she's a screener. That's a vernacular that we in the industry use.
And it means something. Now that we're in a full semantic argument, it means something.
But can she choose who to put on and who not to put on?
Yes, because she's screening the calls.
Let's put it this way, Laura, and you and I have a history of call-in shows.
Right.
So over a 30 to 40 minute period, we usually had 6 or 7 calls.
Right.
Never are the calls stacked. Never is anybody going, I think I'd like to go to this call next because I don't like what that guy's saying. It's generally, every call gets on the air. Unless you're abusive or obviously drunk, You basically get on the air time willing.
Right.
So,
Now,
Mike, can
if
you
you
assure
want-
citizens
if
that they
you-
call, they will get to ask the mayor a question?
If they call, yes, Joey. I noticed you didn't call. I noticed Matt didn't call.
That's because nobody knew about the show until after it had aired.
Well, that's probably. I mean, if you were following the Cable 14 Twitter feed, you sure knew about it.
But now that you know, if they were to call and their voices were recognized, would the expectation be that they'd get through, even if they were going to be highly critical?
Yes, the expectation is that they would get through.
Okay. Well, that's fair, if that's the
Now,
expectation.
my question is to remove the perception of conflict of interest, which does not serve the interests of Cable 14, does not serve the interests of the mayor, in that its critics can say, this is staged, this is fake, this is a free political advertisement provided by Cable 14 to Mayor Bob Bertina, his friend John Best is the host. Could you not find somebody neutral within your organization to be the call screener?
Absolutely not necessary.
So Dr. Setti,
But could you not find somebody to alleviate those concerns in the community?
Well, they obviously don't think that they're credible
I
concerns.
don't, I haven't received a ton of emails. I haven't received one phone call. I've barely seen it measured on Twitter. So I'm just not that concerned with it. I know, Joey, I can assure you there's no hanky-panky going on.
You know, those fighting words for the activists in town when you say you haven't seen sufficient activism. So Dr. Sevigny, you're a communications specialist for McMaster University, joining us in the Lair. The perception of bias, you've got some political chops as well as a communications advisor. Is that something that the station should take seriously on something like this? Or do you think, as Mike says, as long as there is no evidence, no action or evidence of bias, not to worry about it?
You know, I think it depends on what you promise. Right? If you promise that everyone will have access and someone feels that they didn't have access, then there's evidence of bias. But if you don't promise everyone, absolutely, if you say that there's going to be screening and the screening is going to be selective and you don't make the type of how you're going to screen public, then you're free to be as biased as you like.
So you're saying there's not enough wiggle room in Cable 14's assertions that there will be no bias. That it has to be true and clear or there's going to be problems.
Yeah, I think there's been I think the implication is that there's going to be no bias and that everybody will have an equal opportunity to be on, and as long as they're true to that, there won't be any bias. Is there an optics of bias? Sure, there is. Right? It looks a little strange to have the chief of staff screening. It doesn't say, I shouldn't say it looks strange. It looks like there might be bias. But
If you were wearing the proper glasses,
right,
you
sure.
could certainly see the bias.
Yeah, well, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
That's and I hear that loud and clearly.
Yeah.
I also want to say the name of the program is Access the Mayor.
Yeah, which
So if it lives up to the title of the program, then it's good to go. But it'll probably be tested. I mean, you throw something like that out with that kind of assurance, people are going to test it to see if it meets the mettle of it. An example, we did something the other day on Twitter. I tweeted out that I had supported the art crawl on the show. Someone asked, did I attend art crawl? I said, no, that I didn't. I wish I had a super crawl. And then someone on Twitter was accusing me of total bias and this and that. And I said, I declared on the show, when you watch it, that I wasn't at the art crawl. But I think people jump. You mentioned it earlier, Joey. The role of community television is to give as much possible access as you can to politicians, decision makers, etc. And so I think there's a hypercritical audience out there of cable television, unlike any other medium, that says, this is my access station. If my access is being thwarted or unduly influenced, I'm going to get upset.
It's the problem, the perception there of having a political staffer screening the calls when it's supposed to be an access program on an independent media station. That's the problem. When that screener has a history of trying to control the message and trying to exclude any critical voice, it, of course, is going to create a lot of question marks in the community.
Well, in fairness to Peggy, her job is to control the message out of the mayor's office. It's some of the tactics she tried to pursue around.
Well, we had last
media.
week where the mayor at 9:30 said he could not do a media scrum because he had a 12:30 speech he had to go to.
Right.
And it was around the corner. It's that type of perception, and this does not serve the interests of the mayor, because if the mayor is trying to correct this impression, his show is going to be dismissed by critics as biased right from the get-go.
But what about all the other people who will watch it totally unaware of that whole criticism and fall for it?
People are cynical about what they see on TV, what they see in print, what they see in the media. And the cynicism will be fed by the critics saying, well, yeah, of course so-and-so called and asked if the mayor understood that he's the greatest person ever because the screener is the mayor's chief of staff.
Sorry, go ahead, somebody? Yeah, Doctor.
In a sense, the fact that everybody knows that the chief of staff is the screener now is going to ensure that nobody gets screened that might be inflammatory, because if she screens anybody, there's going to be big trouble.
Yeah.
So in fact, this is it might have been a strategy that they thought would enable screening, but actually has kind of backfired.
Not unlike their strategy about controlling who gets access to the media from the Citizen Journalism Corps, only to find that might have blown up in their face, because traditional journalists were saying, hey, wait a second, journalism is journalism. Your audience that you're accountable to are the people who read your information.
The fact of the matter is that you have a mayor who shouldn't understand the media better. You have a chief of staff who should understand the media better. And they're so concerned about everything has to be perfect. As I often note, we've always been at war with Eurasia, is what I expect to come out of the mayor's office tomorrow. That they just can't let things go. I reported that the mayor was going to Regina instead of the Pan Am meeting, because the mayor's chief of staff calls me on the Friday before a Monday meeting at 5 p.m. says, are you live streaming the council meeting, and can you set up a two-way video link for the mayor to participate? Right. I explained to the chief of staff that my role as a journalist is to broadcast. Right. That facilitating a two-way link for the mayor would go outside of that journalistic role. I gave her advice on how she could do it. And I wrote a blog post noting that the mayor was going to Regina, that there was a scheduling conflict. He had called the meeting for the date. He had created the scheduling conflict, and that this was a mistake. The mayor decided to cancel the trip to Regina, and the chief of staff of the mayor calls me on the Sunday night screaming at the top of her lungs over the phone, threatening me, going, if you don't do this, there's going to be consequences. Retract right away. We've got a staffer here who's in tears, who's quitting because you said there was a mistake made in the office. There was no mistake. We always intended that the mayor was going to go to Regina, and now, people have said he should be at the meeting tomorrow, even though he's not saying anything.
Given that I wasn't on the phone, and I will invite Peggy, I know I said this when Ryan McGrew was in here, I will invite Peggy to do a Lair cast if she chooses to. Given that I wasn't on the phone, can we take your retelling of that story at its face? Was she really screaming? Was someone really crying and quitting? Or
she said one of the staffers in the mayor's office had decided to quit in the week leading up to this. But
it just makes you make it sound like there's like a meltdown because of Joey Coleman exclusive.
It's not because of me. It was this, our message wasn't there. Somebody criticized the mayor, and they get very upset when the mayor's criticized. They storm out of interviews with reporters when they don't like the questions. But I remember it was bizarre because Monday morning we're at a council meeting, and the mayor, at the first opportunity he gets to speak, attacks me and publicly calls me a liar, that I was never going to Regina. And we looked into it. We very calmly and rationally went through my reporting. We went through the information we got from the mayor's office, and we did a long blog post on Raise the Hammer, which we showed the emails from the mayor.
Regina wouldn't be the first thin-skinned mayor. Another Bob mayor, we've had 3 of them recently, but Bob Morrow, if he heard me say something he didn't like on Cable 14 15 years ago, would call me at home and yell at me. I mean, so there is a history in Hamilton, lots of passion, lots of thin skin.
It's a matter of the appropriateness of it. So, for example, using your mayoral office to attack citizens at city council. And he's not the first person at council to attack citizens using that podium.
So let's talk about this, because I want to get to what makes you this fired up about stuff that you don't get paid for, and I will get to that in a moment. By the way, we're in the Lair with Joey Coleman, if you hadn't figured out by his voice yet who we're talking to. Agreed, there shouldn't be attacks of citizens, but there seems to be this blurring of the line between who's a citizen, who's an activist, who's a journalist. And again, to Dr. Sevigny here, he mentioned the term citizen journalist earlier. I don't think that the mayor, even with his media background and pedigree, necessarily knows what role you're playing when you're in the middle of a heated discussion with him.
At the time, no, it was very clear what role I was playing. Okay. I was broadcasting the meetings to the public over the internet. Nobody else was. I was covering...
But you weren't doing it for any media outlet, which is new for them.
Correct. But ultimately, I'm a professional journalist. At the time, I was still collecting a paycheck part-time from the Globe and Mail for other work.
Right,
not
but
here.
you were not any Hamilton beat. You weren't,
No.
You weren't paid by anybody, which is part of what I think is part of their conundrum, is how do you control what you don't understand?
Well, I think that, I remember an incident last summer when I was at the Spectator. And I was at the Future Fund meeting on my own time, of my own interest, doing live coverage. And I sat in the back row of the public gallery because I like to sit in the back and get a full view of what's occurring in the room.
It's fun.
And Matt Jelly sat down at the media table. Matt Jelly, clearly an activist, clearly on the other side. And I knew Matt, but Matt and I weren't friends at the time. And I remember him sitting down. He wanted to use the media table to blog and charge his laptop. And the Spectator reporter there got very upset at this and confronted him in the middle of a meeting. And I remember myself, my position, and it's always been this way, was, is he, by using the media tables, interfering in any way with the flow of the meeting? No. With the ability of the working press to do their job? No. Then why is that a problem? And as journalists, it's not our place to police who sits at a media table.
Order, right? It's a closed society. It's I have access, you don't.
Well, see, and the thing is that if journalists want to start paying rental fees to use the media desks, then we get into a different issue where there's a cost to doing it. But those desks are...
So you're essentially collapsing the entire established media structure. I mean, like, there are people in this room, Mike, who's been in the media. Hey, Matt, how are you? Mike has been in the media for a year or two. Hey, Mike, add a couple zeros. Oh, sorry, I should have said a couple. And our producer, who's been actively full-time in the media for, almost 20 years now, Rob? Close to 15. And isn't it true when you go to an event, there's an established pecking order? Who gets what access, who gets to set up their truck where, which reporter gets in front?
I understand what Joey's saying. There's definitely...
And
if someone's been doing that beat long enough, and somebody else shows up...
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Basically just starts plugging things in.
But that's what I'm saying, Joey, is that exists.
But see, the pecking order is...
Some people are very comfortable in
the pecking
their job,
yeah.
And then when this comes at them, they kind of...
The pecking order is necessary when you have a large media scrum in a limited amount of space. And I have been at media conferences where independent newspapers and bloggers have been excluded due to space. Right. And I never raised an objection to that because it's a space issue.
So your objection here is it's nothing to do with logistics. It's to do with
archaic... In that particular situation, there was room for him to sit at the desk.
Yeah.
Let him sit at the desk.
So these are just old archaic power structures.
I mean, I look at it that as long as they're not interfering with the ability of information to flow out of City Hall. In fact, Mr. Jelly was increasing the amount of information flowing out of City Hall to his followers. I have no problem. I mean, I've sat beside Matt at the media table at events, and he doesn't disturb me.
Let me throw this by you, and I'm sure it won't be a shock. Tell me if it is. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've heard from either established media or politicians or pundits in this town that there's a handful of bloggers. I think they think the Red Hill activists came out of the trees and became bloggers. I'm not sure what they think the connection is, but there's a handful of bloggers who are causing all of this nonsense, and everybody's giving it way too much audience. You'd be one of the handful, so would Matt Jelly, who you've already mentioned, a few other people we've had in here. I don't see it as a handful. I see it as there's a whole bunch of people out there tweeting and blogging and Facebooking and engaged in the conversation. But how do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I always go, I actually have Report and Air available on my website. If I'm inaccurate, please feel free to correct me. If I'm accurate and you have a problem with the mediums that I'm using to spread information, well, I'm not concerned about that because ultimately the world is changing. Mm-hmm. And people can choose to change with it or they can fight it. And
you're accountable to your audience. If they don't like you, you don't need a boss. They're going to stop listening to you.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I also work as a freelance journalist professionally. I've covered stories nationally. I've covered stories from the Middle East. Ultimately, if I destroy my brand by publishing inaccuracies or becoming an activist, that's going to cost me dearly.
Now, Dr. Sevigny was talking earlier about journalism's going to become a branded exercise, right? Every journalist is going to create their own brand equity, almost back to the old school columnist kind of thing. It's pretty interesting to hear you say that. But what interests me most about you, Joey, is so much of what I follow about you reporting on Twitter, I know you're not getting paid for. there's nobody who signed you that morning to cover this. And sometimes in the last 6 months since I've been following you, you've actually had the scoop. I've actually seen mainstream media follow your Twitter feed and build stories off of it, not give you credit for the story, mention it was on Twitter, but not give you the credit. So how do you feel about that, and why do you do it? Why do you spend so much time on this?
I had the privilege of working for Maclean's magazine for 2.5 years.
That's fantastic.
And I worked for the Globe and Mail for 2 years, covering higher education. And especially when I was with Maclean's, I did a lot of traveling. And I found that I was disconnected from Hamilton because there was no way for me to follow my civic government.
So I'm just tweeting you while you talk here.
Not a problem. And I've always followed our civic government closely. And when I was working, traveling, I couldn't be at city council meetings.
Right.
And I realized that we have a real information void. So I've come back in the sense of I gave it a try at The Spectator, and I had a good time there. And who knows, I may be back there in the future.
Okay.
And one of the things I did there was, for example, did the first ever live stream of Hamilton City Council, the Pan Am debate on August 10th. 41,192 viewers.
Craziness. That was the apex of all social media integration into the Hamilton.
Well, the hamont hashtag, I created that because when I...
Did you create the hamont hashtag?
Yes.
Really? I exploit it terribly. I'm sure you're mad at me.
Well, nobody can exploit it. It's a community thing.
But did you try to police it early on? You didn't like some promotional messaging? Somebody told me that you were complaining about hamont hashtag usage.
I did. Every once in a while, you get somebody who spams the hashtag, and I will speak up because if a hashtag becomes full of spam, it becomes useless to those who are following it.
You maintain a strong hashtag. I mean, it's great.
And then the hashtag becomes abandoned. And the community becomes fractured. And one of the reasons why I seeded the hashtag was because I looked at Hamilton. We had people on Twitter, but there wasn't a conversation on Twitter because there was no rallying point. There was various hashtags here and there on their own. And Hamont was very simple. People could understand it. I originally experimented with CYHM because YHM, our airport code, belongs to a bunch.
There's a Torrent and there's a Winont, and did
Yeah.
you start the Aunt movement on?
No, I don't think I did. I think that it was plainly obvious to people. It's sort
Okay.
of like the patent system where somebody submits 5 patents for an airbag for an iPhone because it's so. The idea is so obvious that people do it. It just so happened that I was in a position at The Spectator to leverage their existing brand equity to move this community conversation forward. And so the hashtag was built, and because I was broadcasting the council meeting, I didn't have time to moderate comments on thespec.com. So I used the hashtag to import comments using Cover It Live so that people could join the conversation during the council meeting without me having to moderate it because I had to focus on broadcasting and also writing the story that went on the
One
paper.
of the things I love in the answer that you just gave, and yes, I am tweeting. In fact, you want to know what I just tweeted about you? I said, at Joey Coleman, really enjoying talking to you, aka the founder of Hamont hashtag. I just think that's fascinating. Put on the hashtag.
No.
Okay.
No.
But it is open data. We don't care.
No, I'm just wondering because he's got the setup. He said something about wireless network.
Oh, I was checking my email and
That's okay.
working on open data.
You can scoop
stuff.
us. You're the king of Twitter scoops.
And so that
But
moment,
what
if I may,
yeah.
I thought what was really interesting, sort of gets to this old and new divide, was we had sat in the council chamber, and in the morning the chamber was filled, overflowed people in the hall, and I had people coming down to the media desk going, "So you're live broadcasting this?" And I remember, Bat Jelly emailing me at 2 p.m. He's on a patio having a cold beer. Thanks, Joey. I hope you're comfortable at City Hall.
Yeah.
And me wanting to figure out where he was and sent Hitman out after him, but. People left City Hall to go home and watch it live on their computer in a more comfortable setting doing other things. So what happens in the afternoon after lunch break is that it's only the usual suspects in the council chambers,
right.
the dozen people who are there every time. So council goes, oh, we don't really have the public watching now, and they degrade it down into that really relaxed, casual set that they have when nobody's watching. And about 8 p.m., so we've been in council chambers for over 10 hours debating this stadium. One of the councilors gets up and moves to defer the decision to a later date. And I remember the explosion of outrage. At this time, about 5,000 people are watching it. The explosion of outrage and the tweets going, email that councilor, email your councilors. And I'm looking, their Blackberries are all vibrating like crazy. And 2 minutes later, that councilor gets up and he withdraws the deferral. He goes, yeah, and they get back to the debate. And afterwards, he goes, when you said that this was live, I thought it was like taped to air. I'm like, no, it's been live on the internet all day. And it was really interesting because City Hall, they had to upgrade their network on the fly that day, not because of my transmission out, but all the staff inside watching as well.
So this is a podcast, audio cast, so people can't see you visually. But you were like so super thrilled with the influence that you had that day, which you should be, because that's pretty crazy. And I don't remember any other moment in Hamilton online that's been that significant.
What I was thrilled about that day was the success of the fact that people were engaged with City Hall. People were seeing the legislative process in action.
Well, earlier you made a comment I was going to mention, Joey. One of the words that I picked out was you said something about you didn't want the hashtag to be corrupted or spammed because it would break the community. And one of the things that, you know, is making you so excited about this Pan Am story is that the community, because they were following this, reacted, and council changed their mind from, you know, yet another deferral to actually taking a vote. So what I want to ask you is, what is it about Joey Coleman that makes you so, you know, there's an expression, an Athenian pulse, where the blood of your city runs through your veins. What makes you so engaged? What makes you had some gigs at some impressive places, the Globe, Maclean's, but, you know, most of the stuff you do, you're not getting paid for. What makes you want to do this stuff?
As a journalist, you know, you're getting back to the unpaid part. If we can improve engagement in our civic government, if we can get some of the brightest minds in Hamilton involved in our civic government, if our civic government is more transparent, open, and collaborative, we're going to get there as a community. You
know, I have to say, Joey, you have a brain for data, I don't know what I want to call it, a commitment or kind of you're restrained and like you have a discipline for your craft, and you have a passion for Hamilton. It's so fascinating to get to know you. We're lucky to have you, paid or not paid, moving.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, which doesn't matter. Moving mountains in this city, and like you said, you don't have fear of holding truth to power. And thanks for coming in, Lair.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it greatly.
Yeah, well, we have to touch base with you regularly.
Mike Cameron and I will now go for drinks and have a civil conversation after our...
Yeah, see, he'd go for drinks, Mike, but he's got to map something.
Sadly, I actually just realized I'm behind on a deadline for a program I need to write.
Doesn't surprise me for one second. I know you have your fun, and when I saw the glee in the response and the effect of that Pan Am live feed, I know you get your thrills from this. Joey, thanks. Thanks for coming in and talking to us. Now, there was something that Matt Jelly was going to pay you to do, so make some money here.
Well, Matt Jelly said I should try to get it at some point. Laura, I don't trust you.
There you go. Matt, pay up. The guy needs some cash. Okay. Thanks a lot, Joey. Good job. Thanks, guys.
Oh, that's funny.
Chats in the Lair is a Power Group production. Visit us at powergroup.ca or laircast.com. Or check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.